Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I was a bit. My apologies, everybody. I was a bit distracted then because I looked up and saw end broadcast, and I'm thinking, does that mean that we've already finished our free speech because there is no free speech and there's nothing to say? So perhaps we should stop talking before we begin. Anyway, tonight, aside from all that silliness, I'd like to introduce Orla, who's managing the electronics.
Hello.
And is not allowed to speak because there's no free speech in my office.
No free speech.
Sonia and Karen, who are here from Hong Kong, who have a different perspective of things, not because they're from Hong Kong, but just because they're who they are and they're a different generation. Orla's my generation. She just doesn't know it yet. You see, that's free speech.
It is free speech.
Is it
True,
true?
but it doesn't matter when it's free speech.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Is it
exactly.
free speech? It is free speech. Is it true? It doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be.
So Amanda's joined us. Hi, Amanda. Glad to see you here. And at least we've got one person that's listening. That's really good.
Oh, there's one there.
And we've got Annan. Good evening, Annan. She said good evening. She's being very polite.
That's
so
very
that's a different
polite.
kind of free speech.
Yes.
So what we're talking about tonight is, well, before we get into free speech, we're going to talk about Orla's name.
Oh, yeah.
Because that is not a typing error.
No.
If we're going to talk about free speech, standing in integrity and being honest, Orla had to spell her name properly.
Properly, yeah.
So she has.
Yeah.
It's totally unintelligible.
Well, that's the Irish. Oh, yeah, you can say
You
that.
can say that.
It's free speech, yeah.
No, but you can say that because you are
Because I
Irish.
am Irish, yeah. Yeah.
So, hi Tracy, hi Bex, hi Sarupa. As you can tell, we're making a joke of this, but it's not really funny. So, we want to talk about free speech, and I'll start it off by saying I've become more and more concerned about the fact that there's all this cancelling and blocking people and saying they've gone to the dark side and playing with it. If people can't speak their truth, and I'm not talking about defamation of other people, I'm not talking about libel, but if they can't say what they see, what they believe, what they feel, then what kind of world have we created? Is it the world we want? And if it is the world we want, I'm looking for the exit, okay? So I'm going to hand it over. Oh, Amanda says, how is your name pronounced, Orla? Amanda, it's pronounced Orla.
Everything is silent except for the O-R-L-A.
Just to confuse things.
Yeah.
Okay, what would you like to say?
Well, I kind of have a bit of, well, I guess it depends what you think free speech is. So free speech for me is the freedom to express yourself, to say what you want to say, to speak your truth harmlessly. So I feel like I know that's not the definition of free speech, but I find that people use the idea of free speech to say, I can say what I want, when I want, how I want, to who I want, with no consequences. And I don't believe that's how it all began. But nowadays, I feel like, for my own personal definition, is express yourself, but do it harmlessly. You know, be aware of what you're saying or how you're saying it.
Yeah. Okay, Karen.
I agree. Freedom of expression with integrity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one, with integrity. And Sonia.
For me, the free speech is similar to Orla, as a freedom to express themselves. Also do it like in kindness, not like saying I have the right to say this and I can say whatever I want, especially knowing the intent at the back is like attack. It's like in the name of the free speech, and you just say I want to attack somebody, and then that's my right. And yeah.
So the legal definition is a principle that supports the freedom of an individual or a community to articulate their opinions and ideas without fear of retaliation, censorship, or legal sanction. And I think that's where we go wrong. I think that's where we go wrong, because if you speak your truth and you happen to be a very, very angry person, you will most often speak your truth by blaming someone. You'll find the negative of a situation. You'll be angry about it and you'll blame. That's not harmless. However, if you're an angry person and you talk that way, you are in integrity with who you are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is a slippery slope, because how do you define it without making it a box?
Well, because you can, so speaking, free speech that's harmless doesn't necessarily mean you've got to be all sweetness and light, right? So it's not, it doesn't mean that you can't be angry. It doesn't mean that you can't say what you need to say. So I think sometimes as well, people get caught up in the, oh, if it's harmless, then I can only say, agree with people or be nice to people, when actually anger serves a purpose. And sometimes the kindest thing and the most harmless thing to say to somebody is through anger. So there's that as well, you know. So just because you're angry as a person, if you can
No, if you're an angry person, not a person who's angry.
Oh, okay. But then
there's a difference. There's a difference.
Yeah.
And an angry person, being in integrity as an angry person, will express themselves with anger all the time.
Yeah.
And won't care whether they hurt anybody else, because it's like people used to say to me, well, that's my truth. And that's my truth closes down a conversation.
Yeah.
Free speech and saying you can't say this and I'm going to cancel you or ghost you or whatever these modern terms are, prevents an opportunity to discuss two differing points of view and perhaps finding common ground.
I want to add.
We've got, hang on a minute. Bex says.
Do you want to put this on the screen?
Yeah. Who defines what is and isn't harmless or harmful? Different things create reaction in some than in others. No, I'm not talking about how people react. I'm talking, and I presume you're the same. It's the intent with which we speak.
Yeah.
You cannot control what someone else reacts to.
No.
But if your intent is to be harmless and to speak your truth, if it hits somebody else's button, that's not free speech. That's their emotional stuff. What do you think, Sonia?
I agree. Like, you know, like I was just thinking when you say that you were talking about this is my truth and then it's shut down. And also in another way, I feel that's also like, it's like, this is my truth and I'm not going to take any responsibility of what I'm going to say. I'm just find the escape. So it's just like, yeah, that's how I feel, that this is like, I don't want to take responsibility of what I do. I don't want to care. And I feel like I'm entitled. There's an entitlement in it. Yeah.
Sarupa says, maybe also to add, free to speak with civic responsibility and without political correctness. But then we're starting to limit, aren't we? As we add harmlessness, civic responsibility, political, we're limiting free speech. What happened, I suppose this is me showing my age, what happened to the belief that we treat everybody as we want to be treated? So when we speak to them from that perspective.
Oh, that just went out the door. Yeah. Actually, it wasn't that long ago. It was really not even the dawn of social media. It was a few years into social media, and that just went out the door. And it was about people wanting their free speech, really to get attention. So because it became about attention, it no longer was about how I treat people or how I speak to somebody. It was purely about attention, numbers, likes, whatever. So that's what I think happened. It might be an easy answer to say with social media, but it definitely fed into it. And if it was there, I think it expanded it.
So what do you think, Karen?
I think it's, with the social media and the internet, I feel like people can leave comments anonymously. So they feel like there's no repercussions. Yet, and also tying in with what we were talking about, like the emotional stuff, like when one is very emotional, the other that are also equally emotional just all kind of gather. And that's where the kind of ganging up or bullying happens, because, they stand for something and they don't, it's also them not realizing that there is a consequence of that kind of mass kind of coming together like with, you know, the stock market stuff that was happening and other things.
And, you know, we went through a period, and I was keeping an eye on this when we lived in Aussie. I've kind of moved over since. But there was a period where there were a lot of teenagers suiciding because of comments that were made about them anonymously.
Mm.
And they got nowhere to go. It's a different topic, but it still comes from free speech. Those people felt that they had the right to tear that person to pieces. So is free speech, as we are using it today, what free speech is about?
Free speech isn't free.
It's not.
No.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, free speech isn't free. There's a price for everything nowadays, and whatever you say, you have to pay a price for it. So what can we do? What can we do in our way? Because obviously this is going into Facebook, which is mass consciousness. What can we all do in our way to bring a light into that, to perhaps introduce harmlessness or introduce more kindness in how we interact as a group?
Isn't it about also being like honest when you say something, like check the intent, that as the back, like how do I say it? I can make criticism or suggestions, but it's like my intent is not to attack a specific person, is it for the situation? And that's really always constantly check the intent, the way you do it coming from.
Yeah, because it's the energy that we're reacting to. But it's easier if we focus it on the person that we feel is the source of that energy, isn't it? So what Amanda said, there's always been...
Amanda says here,
Go on.
There's always been rumor, conspiracy theories, and public discourse. However, I feel that the speed and breadth of mass and social media means speech gets amplified.
And I think the other thing too, Amanda, I agree with you, but I think the other thing too is, as fast as one thing goes out, before you can respond, something else is coming.
So you can't even get to the point where that conversation is had and comes to a natural conclusion, because, as you say, it's already happened and the next person's piled on and then somebody else has started something else there. So there's no time, no space.
Sarupa.
Let me put Sarupa up here. Is the crisis of freedom of speech because we are in such a huge planetary change? As it's more than speech. It's what we think and what goes out in the world. There's always a consequence.
I don't think it's a huge planetary change. I think it's a huge change for mankind. I don't think what's happening with us verbally is about the shift of energy of the planet as a whole. I think it's about who we are occupying space on the planet. And you know, I've said it a few times over the last couple of years that for me, things have got darker since I first started. And that's an awful thing to say, and it's an awful thing to feel, is that there are more people willing to go out and pull people down publicly than there are people to go out and lift people up publicly. And I think part of that is because the people that do the uplifting, it's not about who they are as a person. Their ego is not involved. They step forward to do it because it's who they are. But the people who pull people down, it's their ego that's involved in doing that, and they want to be seen. So I think it's more the state mankind's in, Sarupa, than the state that the planet's in. What do you guys think?
Oh, I definitely think it's to do with humankind. I don't think it's to do with the planet at all. I think, if anything, it's just an indication of how much change is needed because of the way we're going as a people, and just constantly it's all about being right even when you're wrong. You know, it's that's how, if you listen to any conversation, any discourse, see anything on social media, even on TV, it's no longer about a conversation. It's always about the most attention, the most controversial, and who's right and who's wrong. And I think that's actually showing us that we need really significant change, and really fast, because it's not going in a good direction, and it is getting worse.
And good news doesn't sell.
No, it doesn't sell anything.
No.
Okay, so
Let's see what Haresh.
Yeah.
Perhaps we can listen to the intent behind the words. Whether listening to someone or our own inner voice, we censor ourselves to fit in.
Mm.
Yeah. Perhaps we can be more discerning about where our speech is coming from within our hearts or emotions.
And perhaps we can also be more discerning about who we listen to.
Mm.
Yep.
What is that phrase? Listening with ears that hear, is it? With ears that hear? Yeah.
I wonder also, like, if this whole thing is happening because, I mean, technology is a medium, right? Yet technology has really, even babies, use a tablet. And I think I saw a clip where it was in a kindergarten, and they made an experiment. The kids were all with tablets, so they were playing with themselves. Whereas they're like, okay, tablet time's over, and then they start playing with each other, and they made up games and stuff. So I feel like it might also be because people have less of a real person or real kind of conversation with each other. So they're so used to kind of standing behind like a tablet or whatever. So some type of connection has been lost. Therefore,
the tablet's not emotional, is it?
No.
When the child interacts with other children, there's emotion there, and emotion is the glue that brings us together.
Yep.
So if a child's on a tablet, there is no emotional connection. They become isolated. We're all isolated. I mean, I can remember when we used to go up to Hong Kong, I was horrified at the number of people getting the train from Tung Chung into Central. Everybody's hanging on the strap, on their tablets or their phones. Tony and I were the only two people that actually spoke in the cabin we were in. And we just talked to each other all the way in, and everybody looked at us as though we were nuts. But how is that? How can you develop a caring society where you can speak your truth and be heard, and if not agreed with, have a conversation to find common ground? How can we do that when this is where we're at? It's not my generation, so I suppose I'm an old fogey, but yeah.
Also, because you're behind it. So when you say something, you actually don't know what's the impact on other people. I say something and then they just, it doesn't speak back to me. It doesn't say what I'm saying is actually kind or not kind. It just, the child or the person is hiding behind the mask, and also they don't take responsibility, and then taking away the learning opportunity to how to interact and how to speak.
It doesn't teach socialization.
No.
Which is the challenge.
I think people tend to exercise their free speech a lot more on devices than they do face to face.
Well, because they don't have to face the person they're speaking to.
And that's why it's not completely out of control. Like you say, if you're not sitting and interacting with people, the difference is huge. Like even in situations where people have been trolled and maybe they've gone and found out who it is, and then they've gone on to have a conversation face to face, they come out of it and say, actually, they were fine. They were having a hard time. They took it out on me. So the lack of constant interaction between humans face to face and the kind of explosion of it on a device is also not helping. So there has to be something to be done on the devices through what's been shared there, because that's the trying to do that's the only way to do it. Yeah.
So okay, Sarupa, I don't agree with the cancel culture. I had to learn what this meant. Sometimes I wonder do we turn away from people who are exercising free speech and maybe peddling unkindness or misinformation? As if we challenge or offer another view, you're accused to be part of the problem and often attacked. And yes, the art of conversation and agreeing to disagree has become lost. So my question, and I'm going to apologize in advance, through, because I always say never answer a question with a question, but I'm going to answer a question with a question in this instance, is that is not being silent in return cancelling ourselves? If somebody says something and we don't, and we disagree, and we don't say something because we know we're going to be attacked for it, aren't we also cancelling ourselves? Are we also stopping our own free speech?
Well, it's like Haresh was saying, that's when we censor ourselves.
Yes.
So instead of saying whatever we actually are here to say, we tell ourselves it's so much easier to say nothing.
Yeah.
And actually that's worse
And
almost.
that's, I mean, it's like when you know domestic violence is occurring,
Mm.
Mm.
and you say nothing because it's not your business, they're now saying that you're actually an accessory to that.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
So if we don't call out what we feel is harmful, or if we stop saying what we feel, which is really where this conversation began, if we stop standing in our light and saying what we feel, then we've cancelled ourselves.
Mm.
We've allowed these people and their way of looking at things to be the only voice
Yeah.
to be seen and heard.
Yeah.
Mm.
What Suresh said, we're also very divided globally.
On what is freedom and what is an imposition, instead of what builds community and what does not, such as the COVID restrictions and supporting them.
Well, that's a perfect example, isn't it? The COVID
Mm.
restrictions, because some people agree with them and some people don't agree with them.
Mm.
And who's right and who's wrong is not the argument, but it's become the argument.
So yeah, Amanda says yes, being silent is cancelling ourselves.
And Sarupa, yes, that is
And
exactly.
Sarupa,
Yeah.
that is exactly how I feel. Thank you. I needed to hear that. I've been really observing myself, and yes, it feels. Otherwise, we are enabling. Yes.
Yeah, we are. We're enabling
Yeah.
that culture.
Yeah.
It's up to us to speak our truth.
Mm.
And if people don't like it, they're entitled to not like it.
Mm.
If we're speaking our truth, if we are exercising our right to free speech, hoping that people will like us for it, what are we doing? That's not.
That
what
is
they're
not.
doing.
That's not really free speech. You're just saying
No.
somebody that to please other people. That's you actually censoring before you even say. But and then you think that is the free speech.
Mm.
It's like the irony in it. Yeah.
So how does the audience feel about this conversation so far? Do you feel it's had any value, or do you think we've all gone off on a tangent?
Sophia saying she doesn't agree with the cancel culture. It's about finding the balance between different voices and respect, and about agreeing and agreeing to disagree.
See, I thought the cancel culture was when people had a habit of ordering something and then cancelling it.
No, if only it was. If only it was. So much easier.
Because to me, that's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
You know, the cancel culture. Oh, they must be ordering a lot of things and cancelling them. Culture. What a waste of time.
Oh,
Never mind.
Yes.
I think we need to have more conversations like this. Karen.
Yesterday, I was watching an interview with a business leader, and he said, you know, like going forward, it's really about innovation for his business because, you know, the world is changing so quickly. And he said, you know, like innovation requires many different voices, and therefore, like he would encourage, you know, like his team to speak up, because all the different voices would offer a different potential perspective in creating that new innovation. So I think that ties into, you know, speaking as in like sharing and not kind of attacking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not proving, like in a boardroom situation or whatever.
So when you get into proving, it's about what you're saying is right or wrong. Whereas if you express what you feel, in his situation, they're fortunate that they have a boss that encourages their voices. Because that's what we need. We need as many voices as possible to share how they see things, how they feel about things, so that we stop narrowing everything down to what is or isn't appropriate to some people. Different. We're meant to be different. We learn from each other if we share those differences.
Yeah.
Well, in asking what the audience think, Elaine is exercising her free speech here. This is what she says. Rubbish.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you. You arrived.
That's the best free speech tonight.
Yes. And Elaine, you will be horsewhipped severely later. But pretending it's okay.
Yeah, the people are like enjoying the conversation. Haresh says it starts with intent and energy, and that's more expansive than our ideas and personalities being heard. For sure.
Yeah, I think,
for sure.
Yeah, it's not about who's right or wrong. We could all have a different perspective on one thing. I mean, it's like they say, a picture says 1,000 words, but 5 people will interpret that picture differently.
Yep.
And they'll all be right based on their experiences and where they're coming from. They'll all be right for them. It will have meaning for them. It will align with them. If we can't, as one of those 5 people, sit around and say, how do you see it? Oh, okay. How do you see it? Well, I don't agree with that, but I can see how you might. Then we have a conversation. We're not having conversations. I think with social media, it's becoming more and more monologues, isn't it?
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
Or it's a conversation between people who think exactly the same thing about exactly the same topic, and nobody else is allowed in.
You mean like us tonight?
No. So we're just exercising our free speech, right? I'll put a reaction to that up.
When we rubbish. When we disagree, actually, sometimes like we all talk like why we disagree, why we don't like, and actually through discussion, actually many great ideas. That's how all the creativities come out, because then you learn, oh, that's where it's coming from, and then because of that, that's creation for another things, and that's what I've learned, the beauty of that.
I agree. And interesting that this is what Elaine said. Do you think that there's now a generation that have no idea how to have an argument?
I think they know how to argue. I think they don't know how to debate. I think arguing, no problem, but debating, the idea that they might have to listen to somebody else, or even to be willing to listen, or to know how to listen to somebody else, that's, I think, this generation's issue, one of their issues.
And they will say that's one of our issues is something else.
Really picking on a generation and being harmful, are you, Ola? No. I think you need to say that a bit more harmlessly.
Harmlessly, yes. So just what I just said there, and just wrap it in a bubble of harmlessness.
I agree with you, Elaine. I do think that there is a generation that don't know how to have an argument. And I think for a lot of people, whether you use the word argument or debate, and I take your point, but whether you use the word argument or debate, people see it as negative.
Yeah.
Yep.
And particularly in the spiritual community, you can't have an argument. You can't disagree with somebody. You've always got to be sweetness and light. You've always got to agree. Except that if you never disagree, if you have a different way of looking at things, if you don't say, I don't agree with that, this is how I see it, how are we going to move forward? How can anybody learn and grow? We can't take it to another level.
No, keep it small.
Yeah.
There we go. So Pia is asking, why is argument a negative?
It isn't, but a lot of people see it that way. If you argue, you're being negative. You're not accepting the other person. That's not true. You are accepting them. You may not be accepting what they're saying as being valid for you.
I feel some people consider argument as like, oh, if you argue with me, then you didn't like me, or you don't like me, and then they take it like personally, rather than actually, hey, I'm talking about situation and how we can work together. They get so personal.
Yeah, I think so. I think with the rise in social media, people have become more focused on self. You know, the selfie. Always posting so that people can say where you are and what you're doing at any minute of the day. Is that really what our lives are about? I don't. To me, social media could be a tremendous tool for good, using free speech constructively. Can be a tremendous tool for good, but it can also send people to sleep. Because
there's no argument, there's no fire, or they don't perceive
there's no fire. It's all air.
Yeah.
It's all air.
Yeah.
It's all mental. There's no fire. Amanda, because a lot of discussions involve anger and competition, so there's no respect. No models for how to have a respectful conversation. We could promote how to collaborate with respect. Yeah, we could. I think that's a great idea. What else could we do? Apart from close in about a minute. What else could we do? Because I think this is a good discussion. I'm enjoying this. Do you want to carry it on?
Yeah.
Not, now, but do you want to carry it on to another meeting? Let us know. But what else could we do? Perhaps the audience would like to come up with some suggestions and ideas that we can talk about next month, because I do think it's a really important conversation to have. But then that's just me.
And me.
And Ola.
Hannah and me.
Or Faith.
Yes, me or Faith.
Or Faith. Stop defining people by their words. What does that mean, Sarupa? Clarify that, please.
We can, it's even like an everyday thing when you're out and about, how you interact with people in shops and restaurants, on the street.
Yeah.
Just how you interact with them, because people are around, or sometimes if you're in a supermarket and there is somebody who's being rude to the cashier or whatever, that you say something, like it's little things that kind of, you know, indicate a different way of being, rather than saying nothing or just taking your mood out, which people do all the time. Take your mood out on others.
Yeah. And you know, it's not what we say, it's how we say it.
Yeah.
Can make a big difference. Discussions on how to debate. Yeah, the art of debate is a good one. Peter said, possibly if we make it about us, not me, then we can start making things less personal. I mean, that's true. There's a lot of things that we could do. I'd like to see us carry on with this and see what might come out of it. If you're interested in carrying it on, let us know. If you think we've hit the wall with it, then that's fine. Sarupa said, what she says is she means we're in a state where your words are how people judge you, and we've forgotten to see the light. You know, your words are how people judge you. So we're not seeing the light within the person, we're only attaching to how they communicate what they're saying.
Or you're probably just reading it on Twitter or Instagram, whatever, so therefore you're deciding that's who they are.
Okay, so Vinny said, I remember my mum disliking my dad and I arguing. She felt conflict where it could be said he was encouraging the skill of thinking for yourself, speaking out. Absolutely. My dad and I used to have some humdingers. It was great. He'd be one side of the kitchen and I'd be the other, and we didn't agree with each other at all. But I was fortunate because at one point, at a certain point in the conversation, one of us would stop and start laughing. And that'd be the end of it. And we'd end up rating it out of 10. Was it a good one or was it
a very good one?
So it looks like we've got some people that want us to carry on with this.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to disagree with all of you because I had the next topic already selected and I don't think you've got any right to tell me to change it.
Yeah. How dare you exercise your free speech? Unbelievable. Not you, then. You can. I know,
they shouldn't. So let's talk about this some more, and perhaps over the next couple of weeks, how about we get together our ideas so that, and we have a debate, or perhaps, no, we talk about how to debate first.
Yeah.
Yes.
The next conversation, let's talk about how we can debate this.
Yeah.
And let's have people that believe in free speech and people that believe we should be politically correct. I don't think there's anybody in this group that's going to think we should be politically correct.
No, but I will debate it, though.
But I
would debate it, yeah.
If you're good at debating, you can argue anything. So I think we really need to start lightening up, having fun, but standing up for what is important to us. And for me, what did we fight wars for if it wasn't for the right to speak our truth?
Yeah.
But not for the right to speak our truth and assassinate somebody in the process.
That's been forgotten because it is recent history, but for younger generations, as far as they're concerned, it's way, way ancient history, and it's all been forgotten.
Yeah.
Marianne,
Amanda says she doesn't know how to debate.
Marianne says she rates this conversation 10 out of 10.
I failed. Thank you, Marianne. I appreciate that. Doris enjoyed it. I'm glad. Yes, let's meet again in a month.
Yeah.
And who knows? Instead of having a consensus that agrees, we might have a group of people that have gone away, thought about it, and that come back and use Elaine's comment. Rubbish. don't agree with it. We're not doing it anymore. So thank you. Thank you to Karen. Thank you to Sonia.
Don't bother.
All right.
And thank you too.
We will see you in a month. Go kindly and with light. And remember, everybody you meet is a part of the divine. Even if you don't like them, especially if you don't like them, because they're there to help you. So talk to you later. Bye for now.
Bye.